We're talking 49ers receivers, how they're ranked amongst NFL wide receiving cores, and which 49ers do you want to own for fantasy, catching PPR passes for your fantasy leagues in 2025 on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you as always at BD Peacock, at Coach Crocky on Twitter. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love and appreciate all of our everydayers out there. Thanks for hanging with us as we get ready for training camp. Of course, you know the score. If you are listening on a Wednesday morning on your way to work, possibly, then you know what day it is. It is Winky Wednesday. I will bring on our weekly guest momentarily. I just want to let everybody know out there that today's episode is sponsored by our latest sponsor, Rugette and MonarchMoney.com. And now let's bring on today's guest.
Nicholas Winkler, come on down.
Wow. Can't believe it.
Wink, how you doing, my man? You are the commissioner of our fantasy football league that I'm in. So I can't wait for you to give me all of your information on what you want to do in your fantasy league this year. So I can plan accordingly if I want to have any 49ers on the roster. I started off last year's draft with the San Francisco 49er at 1.1. Didn't turn out great for me last season. And we'll talk about where Christian McCaffrey's ranked and other 49ers receivers. But I'm going to start this off by going to PFF and PFF.com. And PFF is list season, and they're the kings of the lists, man. And they put out every kind of list in every kind of way. And they ranked receiving groups in the NFL. And Wink, you brought this to my attention, and I expected the 49ers to be a lot lower. Now, this is not just wide receivers, this is the receiving core. So that means George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey are a factor here. I was surprised the 49ers ranked number 5 in the NFL. And obviously the tight end and running back doing heavy lifting when you consider the 49ers wide receiver group, which is one of the big questions, I think, with an injured Brandon Aiyuk and maybe an upset Brandon Aiyuk as well. What are your thoughts on the 49ers receiver group? Were you surprised that they're ranked as high as number 5 in the NFL behind the Philadelphia Eagles, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Cincinnati Bengals, Detroit Lions?
I mean, I'm with you. When I first saw the title, I was like, oh, wide receivers. Yeah, let's go take a look at where they think Pearsall and Aiyuk and Jennings, are going to rank. And oh, they don't have Debo anymore. I literally scrolled past them because I was like, oh, it's going to be at the bottom. Like, I'll just scroll down. I was like, wait, keep going up. What? And then you read the article. And then it makes sense because you said it. With a healthy Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle, those two guys catch a lot of passes. And they're two of the best at their position in the NFL. McCaffrey may be one of the best receiving running backs of all time. So when you factor that in, the 5th place makes a whole lot more sense.
Right. And then, Croc, you talk about the wide receiver group. It's more of a sleeper wide receiver group right now than probably wide receivers that you would be pounding the table for one of these guys. And we'll talk about what we think about them for fantasy, because the guy who's been an all-pro, Brandon Aiyuk, recovering from his ACL still. But if he comes back and he's that guy with Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle, you can see why this could be a really powerhouse group of receivers for the San Francisco 49ers. Juwan Jennings, perennially underrated by everybody in the NFL. And then I think Ricky Pearsall came on strong last year. He's a first-round pick for a reason. The 49ers really like this guy. So it could be a really good group of wide receivers, but there's still just a lot of unknowns with those guys on the outside.
Yeah, I think them even factoring in Aiyuk's injury to this makes it more intriguing of a conversation. But the 49ers do have tremendous pass catchers out there, right? If you have a healthy Christian McCaffrey, you have George Kittle, who's arguably the best tight end in all of football. And you have some other guys that really fit what the 49ers do and came on strong. So there may be a little bit of projection with guys like Ricky Pearsall, but also still liking Juwan Jennings, who is just shy of having a 1,000-yard season. The 49ers have a really good thing going with a lot of pass catchers that they have.
And by the way, you can go to profootballfocus.com if you want to see the entire list of receiving groups as they are ranked in the NFL. Niners, number 1 in the NFC West. I'll talk about some of the other NFC West rankings here, just to get to know our enemies a little bit as we get ready for 2025. There might be some new ideas that you might be surprised about. Another team that has a tight end that's amongst the highest ranked for fantasy football this year in Trey McBride. So the Arizona Cardinals come in at number 18, and they are the next best NFC West team graded with for their receiving group. Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr. could have a huge year too. It was a little bit of a slow start last year. They have some other talent on that team as well. You go down to the Seattle Seahawks, they're ranked number 20. They lost DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett moved on as well. They brought in Cooper Kupp, though, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling to go with Puka Nacua there in that group. And then you go to I'm sorry, I'm getting my Rams and my Seahawks mixed up here because Cooper Kupp jumped ship. No, Puka Nacua is not involved with that because
Smith and Jigba, I think you meant.
Jigba is there. Puka Nacua is with the Los Angeles Rams, who are I'm still scrolling down. I'm trying to find the Rams. Did I pass up the Rams? The Rams are the Rams are not that far down. The Rams are number 8 on the list. I passed them up. So Puka Nacua, to Atwell. They brought in Devontae Adams, which I nearly forgot about. Tyler Higbee. They drafted a second-round tight end as well in Ferguson out of Oregon. So PFF kind of likes that group of receivers and pass catchers over there in Los Angeles with the Rams, but not as much as they like the San Francisco 49ers.
I think that's a big thing right there, right? Like you can look at the 49ers pass catcher group and maybe say, oh, no, it's not this amazing star-studded group. But then when you kind of look around the league, and if you start to make a list of other teams, wide receiver or pass catching groups, I think it makes you appreciate more what the 49ers have to offer as pass catchers.
Yeah, the 49ers have legitimately 3 all-pros to catch passes and potentially other guys that could become that, depending on what happens with, say, Ricky Pearsall, too. So, yeah, it's a star-studded group that the 49ers have.
Yeah, I mean, a healthy Christian McCaffrey can change any list, right? It could be talking about your best blockers, your best offensive lines. You have a Christian McCaffrey behind you who's healthy, he's going to make your offensive line look a lot better than not Christian McCaffrey behind you. So he's one of those guys that's just a difference maker no matter what you're talking about.
And speaking of all pros, that is if Brandon Aiyuk is still around. A lot of people, I saw this earlier this week, and I didn't really think that much of it, but I want to bring it up just because we're talking about pass catchers. And a lot of people are making a huge deal about what Brandon Aiyuk posted on, I believe it was Instagram, one of his socials. And I've got the quote here, guys. And Wink, I know you haven't even seen it, and you're like, yeah, I don't know. So I'll read it, and you can react live to it. Croc, I know, has seen it. Croc and I didn't think it was worth bringing up here on the podcast, but maybe it is a bigger deal than I think it is. And we heard John Lynch say that basically they kind of hugged it out, and whatever was weird is not weird, and they're moving on. They love Brandon Aiyuk, and he's part of their plan. That's why they signed him and all that stuff. And then Brandon Aiyuk had this to say. It's quote, "They was talking about trading me while I was off Percocets, muscle relaxers, and peeing in a cup by my bed. Couldn't walk for 10 weeks. Ain't nobody trading for me." Laughing emoji, skull emoji. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he's right. No one's going to trade for that guy when he's like that. What's he worth? You're not going to trade him away when he's at his lowest value. Like, come on, man. That's silly.
Now, when he said he was talking about trading me, is he talking about 49ers were, or is they the media?
Just talking heads.
The media was talking about it, but is they the 49ers? It sounds like he's saying they is the 49ers.
That's one way to take it. That's one way to take it. But he might be just talking about talking heads. And the other thing is, say what you want to say, right? Like say the team, or say
like you mean it.
Yeah, we all went to college, right? You write a paper, you had to put references in there. Give me a reference. Who are you replying to? Let me know what you're trying to say. If it's worth saying, let it communicate, right? That's what the whole purpose of it is. You're throwing it out there. Communicate to us what you're trying to say. That's the problem I have with it. I don't think he's that mad at the 49ers. I think they're going to be fine. He might be not even be talking about the 49ers. He might be talking about something else. I think nobody's talking about him. I think it's the opposite. I think he hasn't heard enough about himself in 2 weeks, and he's like, I need to have some articles written about me. I need some listicles. I need my name to be on some podcasts because people haven't been talking about me. That's how I read this, and that is frustrating in its own right, I think.
Did you guys forget about me? Same.
I feel like if it was media heads, I feel like he would have made that more clear. The fact that he wasn't specific about who almost makes me feel like they is the 49ers.
They has to be the 49ers. Why would this be something he would write on June 22nd? Or
it's a weird time to do it. Yeah.
Responding to something or
I have
sounds
no
like
idea.
It was just a straight post, right? It was just
out of nowhere. Like, what are you talking about? Why are you talking about this right now? This would have made
guys,
sense a couple months ago.
I'll quote myself here. I don't buy it. It's not the 49ers. I don't buy it. I don't.
So yeah, look, I don't even know what to think about it. That's why we didn't address it on the podcast. It's like, I don't know. I just shrugged. Wide receivers are weird. Right, Croc? They're almost as weird as
it
defense.
just sounds like ain't nobody traded for me. I'm peeing in the cup. I don't know. He feels some type of way. I hear John Lynch saying that, we hugged it out and all this, but if anybody out there listen to this podcast when you've been at your lowest, which that's his lowest, right? Well, lowest probably emotionally and physically, not financially, of course, right? But just at your lowest. And then the people that you feel like you're supposed to get the most support from, you're listening to what people are saying, maybe some vibes that you're getting from them. You probably feel like kind of slighted. And I think anybody would feel some type of way. Man, I was at my lowest and your energy was kind of off towards me. I don't think that's something that people just let go.
Yeah, I mean, even if they came to him and said, hey, we're shopping you around, we're going to see if we can get something. And like you mentioned, if you're at your lowest and someone comes to you and is basically like, hey, we're looking to break up with you, if somebody will have you, like that's going to sting a little bit. If that's the case.
Fatigue, I think, is the word that I would associate with how most fans feel about Aiyuk and the whole situation. And fans don't like hearing a player talk about their team, and there might be some fans that have an Aiyuk jersey on, and they're like, yeah, you go Aiyuk. But there's probably a lot of fans that have a 49ers jersey that has a different name on it or just says 49ers. And they're like, I don't want to hear you being upset. Go somewhere else if that's what you want to think. And so I know some fans, I don't look too much into these types of things, but if Aiyuk really doesn't want to be around, then maybe at some point it'll come to a head. But at this point, he's under contract, and like he said, no one wants to trade for him anyway. So he's here, and it's going to be that way. Where do you draft him in your fantasy football leagues? 49ers fantasy next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Rugette. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra, Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugette Ready. Rugette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue, kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. You can even read real customer reviews on their site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. Just head to Rugette.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's Rugette, Rugiette.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugette website for full safety information. So as earlier mentioned, Wink, I drafted Christian McCaffrey in our fantasy league 1.1. Didn't work out great. Where do you draft Christian McCaffrey this year? Do you go back and take him number 1 overall if you have that pick? Because we know how good a healthy Christian McCaffrey is.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a first round pick, but if I'm sitting number 1, I might think twice about that. I like to go receiver early. I'm not a big, especially in a PPR league. I mean, again, PPR monster. If he's healthy and he plays all year long, Christian McCaffrey is tough to beat. There's a reason he, was offensive player of the year a couple of years ago. But I just, and I know you wouldn't if you were 1-1 right now. I don't even know if you were like 1-8 and he fell that far. I don't think you'd take him. I think he soured on him.
Especially after you get burned. But
yeah,
you don't have to draft him 1.8. Right now, his ADP, according to ESPN, is 13. So,
there's no way he's lasting that long.
No, I'm sorry. PFF has him ranked 13. His ADP is 9.2.
Yeah, so I was going to say, he's going to go top 10, 100%, especially after training camp comes around and you start seeing video of him out there running around healthy. He's going to be a top 5 pick before it's all said and done.
I don't like drafting skill players of the 49ers, but you definitely take Christian McCaffrey because, there's two things that's going to happen. One, they're going to throw him the ball and he's going to be productive. But Kyle's going to do everything in his power to get him the most touches ever, and he doesn't even want to come out the game. So there's just more opportunities. I'm always big on that. Anytime you're betting or anything like that, fantasy football, give me someone that's going to give me a chance, right? It's like a basketball player. Maybe you're playing one of those daily fantasy things, and you want to take the over on their points. Give me someone that I know if he has an off night, all right, but I can live with that because at least he gave me a chance because he's shooting the ball a lot. Right, as opposed to somebody that just doesn't shoot. I think Christian McCaffrey, if I draft him high, he's out there, he will be utilized.
Yep, he'll be the focus.
Just make sure you get his handcuff, which was the problem that Peacock didn't do last year. He did not draft Mason, and someone else did.
We don't have
drafted someone else's handcuff right before Mason went. I remember that.
Yeah, you can. I don't subscribe to the handcuff theory because I would rather have a better handcuff of somebody else. So I'm still, and so maybe you have the best of both worlds, right? And so it's a little bit of a. I'm not
Mason
playing.
Was really good for the first 5 or 6 weeks.
Mason is really good. Mason is really good. My theory on handcuffs is that you draft the better player. You don't focus on the handcuff of your own guy. You focus on maybe a better handcuff for somebody else if you like the RB2 better. But when it comes to fantasy theory, and I'm not playing for like 4th place,
Right.
I'm trying to win the thing. And so if you end up with just a mediocre backup, then what's the point of that anyway? I'm swinging bigger. That's why it's not really the.
And I think normally now, but you're talking about a Kyle Shanahan offense where he'll give one running back the ball, 90% of the time in a game. So you go and get that second and third string running back for the 49ers in a draft. Like, you just do it.
Here's the problem. And I made the right pick, but this is probably something that I think a lot of our listeners feel, because this happens a lot, because you get in a league with a lot of people, and there's a lot of 49ers fans. So what happens is Jordan Mason goes 2 rounds too early, which is what happened. He should have been there for my next pick or 2 picks later, but he wasn't. That happens a lot as well. And I was a big fan of Jordan Mason, so everybody knows, listen to this pod, that I'm big on Jordan Mason. But this year, who is that handcuff then, Wink?
Yeah, that's the question. Is it Garendo? I mean, all signs point to Garendo, right?
Croc? Garendo is RB2, but I'm not so sure. Let's say Christian McCaffrey, same thing happens. He doesn't play all year. I'm not so sure that Jordan James wouldn't lead the 49ers in carries, because I think Garendo's fit is better as the change of pace guy. And I think he might stay in that role and get leapfrog on early downs by the rookie potentially. So that
all comes down to blocking, right? Can he pass protect? Because if he can't pass protect, Kyle's not going to play him.
James has kind of that Kendall Hunter bit to him.
Ooh, I like that.
Feel to him. Like Kendall Hunter, kind of what he was for the 49ers, backing up Frank Gore, as opposed to Garendo. Garendo, solid, and obviously he's shown he can spring off some big runs. But I'm looking for that guy that I feel like can be a little bit more consistent. And I love everything about the style that James runs with. So if I had to draft a backup, which, I mean, it's just so tough for the 49ers, but I mean, they lose multiple running backs per year.
They're both going to get drafted.
You might as well take a couple of backup 49er running backs.
Yeah, some of the easiest money is to draft Kyle Shanahan's RB3 because eventually he's going to be the starter, and his RB2 might be too expensive.
Yeah, he's got to hold on to him. Just don't drop him too early. That's the big mistake.
Garendo's never been able to carry the load. Got hurt last year when he was used a lot. He started one game in his college career. I think he's change of pace guy. I think that's what he is. I think he'd be really good at that in the NFL, but I don't think he's going to be a bell cow if Christian McCaffrey gets hurt. Let's talk wide receivers to own with the San Francisco 49ers and, of course, the great George Kittle next. So George Kittle, we know he was a stud last year, 1,100 receiving yards. We've talked about numerous times on this podcast. Croc, you weren't, I think it was last week, Wednesday, Wink and I talked about feeding George Kittle a little more. And I already know how you feel about that, Croc. But even with not being fed, even with getting 50 fewer targets than Brock Bowers and Travis Kelce and guys like that, he's still putting up numbers. And when George Kittle's healthy, similar to Christian McCaffrey, he's going to put up numbers. So wherever you have to draft George Kittle, he's worth it. It's awesome having a stud tight end in your fantasy leagues. Do you guys disagree there?
No, I agree. For me. Yeah. I mean, I love having a good tight end. I usually spend one of my first 3 or 4 picks on a big name tight end. I've never had George Kittle, but see, here's the problem. Just like with you, Croc, I'm not a big fan of drafting skill position players for the 49ers because then when someone else scores for the 49ers, there's kind of that part of me that's like, oh, man, that kind of sucks. And last year, I made the mistake of drafting Deebo Samuel pretty early, and that did not go well for me at all. So I think I'm soured on 49ers again going forward in this year's draft.
Yeah, that is great.
I always go back to the usage. So I'm trying to go to George Kittle's stats right now from last season. And I bet you're going to see an alarming amount of games where he's just not getting a ton of opportunities. Yeah. So I have it pulled up now.
Getting 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, but yeah, a bunch was 0 and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and he looks like he's efficient. You do see some touchdowns there, but in the first game, I'd say the first 4 games, he actually is being targeted a decent amount. I always feel like however much they targeted him, it actually should be more, especially if it's highly efficient. So week 1, 4 catches on 5 targets. Well, he probably should have had 8 targets. You know what I'm saying? The Minnesota Vikings game, 7 catches on 8 targets. New England next game, 4 catches on 4 targets. Now in this game, they targeted him 12 times. He had 8 catches. A lower output on yards than you would like to see. But the one thing on the previous 3 games I just mentioned, he scored touchdowns in all 3 of those. And then in the next game against Seattle, he scored 2 touchdowns. So I would say if he kind of continues on this, you like him. But then down the stretch when you need him most, come postseason, he's putting up big yardage, but 0 touchdowns in the last 6 games of the season. So he had hit some of his bigger outputs yardage-wise, but no touchdowns. So it's like, where's the consistency?
That's the double-edged sword, right? Do you want a guy that goes off early for you and puts you in a position to get into the playoffs in the postseason? But if he doesn't perform for the first 6-7 weeks, you're not even going to make the playoffs, right? That's why we love fantasy.
I hate fantasy. I'm in fewer and fewer fantasy leagues all the time. And Wink, yours is one of the last ones that I regularly do anymore. George Kittle, 39.4 ADP, totally worth it. He's a stud and will continue to be a stud when healthy for the 49ers. And keep feeding him. Feed him more. Mm-hmm. Moving on to wide receivers. Brandon Aiyuk's probably going to miss some time to start the year. Where are you guys at with Brandon Aiyuk? Do you expect to see that all-pro guy again, or would you rather draft, say, Juwan Jennings? He's going pick 103. Brandon Aiyuk is going pick 106. They're going around the same spot. You're going to get more games of Juwan Jennings. Is Juwan Jennings going to take a back seat, though, once Brandon Aiyuk comes back? And then what about Ricky Pearsall? And Ricky Pearsall is actually going even later than those guys. He's ranked number 128 overall, 49th wide receiver, according to PFF, 49th wide receiver, whereas Juwan Jennings and John Jennings is wide receiver 38. Brandon Aiyuk, wide receiver 41. Really interesting group. Which one of those you guys, they're pretty tight. Which one of those guys would you be drafting in your fantasy leagues?
I mean, when you're talking 9th, 10th round, 11th round, 12th round, that kind of stuff, are you looking for like a low end starter, or are you looking for a guy that, again, like with Aiyuk, that might miss some time to start the year, but then come week 6, week 7, week 8, when you really start to need some wins towards the end of the year, is that when he's peaking, right? Whereas some other guys are maybe tailing off towards the end of the season. So that's a tough choice.
That's a tough one because again, I just have a tough time drafting 49 skill guys. But if I had to, especially out of those 3, I would go Aiyuk because again, I would fully be expecting a slow start. Matter of fact, I may draft Aiyuk and then come back and kind of draft his handcuff Pearsall, but Pearsall's going to be the one that keeps me in the loop of everything early on, right? You got to hope and pray that he doesn't have a stretch of what we saw late last year where he had, I think it was over a stretch of 3 games, he had like 0 catches and like 2 targets, just something wild, right? Where he just was not getting targeted at all for whatever reason. I'd assume year 2, he's going to be much more involved in the offense, especially early on. And then when Aiyuk is back, you want to give him kind of, a little bit of time to kind of find his footing. And then now all of a sudden you start seeing him be more productive. All right, it's time. I can make that switch. And maybe you play both of those guys and maybe Pearsall is your flex.
I like that a lot. I think of the 3, I'm taking Pearsall, but I love the discount on Aiyuk. You throw him on your IR and you hope he looks like the same guy. But there is a question of what he's going to look like when he is back and just not knowing when he's going to come back. And you've got to get a huge discount just because he might be gone for a month, but he might be gone for 2 months. And does that linger? So to me, the guy, and he's especially if he's going to be the cheapest of the 3 to draft, get him later is Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah.
I mean, Kyle Shanahan obviously loved him. It doesn't seem like he's entering any kind of a doghouse phase for the San Francisco 49ers. You never know there. You don't like that he's kind of been nicked up a little bit with some injuries and, gunshot wounds aside, he's still had some spring injuries both seasons now of his 2 years in the league. But when it comes to the per game splits for Ricky Pearsall and what it looked like for him at the end of the year. So it's going to be Pearsall and Juwan Jennings starting, right? And I know Juwan Jennings is super consistent, but what's the lineup going to look like when Brandon Aiyuk comes back? And that's where I think that for the 49ers, he goes back to that like big slot third wide receiver role. And so I think Ricky Pearsall's the one to own if he stays in the starting lineup, and he could be the number 1 target right out of the gate. And you saw some games late in the season against the Lions, 8 catches on 10 targets, 141 yards and a touchdown, right? Now he was a cardio king for some weeks before that, but you see what it looked like at the end of the year when things started to come together. Could he be that from week 1 all season long for the 49ers? Ricky Pearsall,
Niners,
the easy
they got a bunch,
because he's cheap.
and I think you're right, because he's cheap and because they have a lot of targets that went to Deebo Samuel last year. They got to find somebody, and Ricky Pearsall seems like the logical person that you would want to kind of, obviously not Deebo, but fill in kind of that role.
He's going to be very different, not wide back stuff, but he's going to play this knee position. Like that's the position that's vacated. That's where he was drafted to play that. You probably don't want him as the X. You probably don't want him up on the line of scrimmage a lot. He doesn't do as well with press, his play strength, but you can move him around, get him the quick jitterbug. And he might actually take a lot from Juwan Jennings because that third down, wiggle that he has, the ability to get open and catch the football. And Juwan Jennings is so good there where some of those targets start to go toward Ricky Pearsall as well on top of everything. So yeah, the easy answer for me is Ricky Pearsall. He'll probably be on a lot of my fantasy teams unless there's a bunch of other 49ers fans in there, or he starts going crazy in the preseason, right? Which is entirely possible.
You have to overpay.
Now, the big thing with both Aiyuk now, because he's coming off in the injury, and Pearsall is if they can stay healthy. And that's when Juwan Jennings kind of gets inserted into this conversation, because out of all the guys, like if you had to say, hey, what receiver is going to play the most games this season? It's like Juwan Jennings.
Yeah.
He's just always on the field. Ricky Pearsall has barely showed us the ability to play for a quarter of the season straight.
Sure.
Right. I mean, and just the things that have happened to him, even outside of the shooting, but leading up to that, just the shoulder injuries, the setback, and missing this, and then missing a little bit more time, and then coming back and finding his footing. Like, there's a lot going on there. And I expect it to not be that way this offseason, but it kind of has already started out that way in OTAs. Now, they would probably tell you, oh, no, he if we had a game tomorrow, he would play. But history shows maybe he wouldn't, because we've seen him miss so much time off of some of these injuries. So Pearsall's a little scary. Aiyuk coming off an injury. I do trust that Juwan Jennings is just going to be on the field.
Much more consistent player. You know what you're going to get from Juwan Jennings. Will the volume be there for your fantasy team would be my question. And what's his role when Aiyuk comes back? Is Aiyuk still the all-pro guy when he comes back? Ricky Pearsall, it's early in his career. We have no idea. That could go a lot of directions still. So interesting group. Who is your favorite? Let us know at BD Peacock, at Coach Crocky, at Bay Area Wink. Drop a comment on YouTube. Subscribe while you're there. And Croc and I back tomorrow right here. Locked On 49ers.
I don't buy it. I don't.